Hey guys, it's James. You might know me from a channel called Smokescreen. You see the logo on my hat. I am the Hand of the King over there. My buddy Chris invited me on his channel a little over a year ago, I guess, and had me asking him questions that his viewers had sent in about a show called Game of Thrones that I had never seen. I had my own little sports channel he'd helped me start just a few months prior to that. So I was on there mispronouncing all these names and places, and it was so funny. Well, anyway, he talked me into watching the show, and I gotta say, I was hooked pretty quick, on the show at least. And so as time progressed and we did more videos, I found myself learning the names a little better and the places and the plot lines of each character, and really got into it. Chris in the videos and, well, just in conversation, he does a lot of book quoting, and he tells me about, there's some things that are slightly different in the book that the guys who make the show on HBO, D&D, everybody calls them, they've taken some liberties and done some things differently, just like all Hollywood adaptations of books seem to do. So I was curious about reading the books. Now, honestly, I'm not a big novel reader myself. I have read a few, but I've always just mainly read magazines and sports books and sports stats books and things like that. Devour those, but when it comes to diving into a long book, let alone a long series of books, it's very intimidating. I can't lie. So I decided to, start my own little channel, and it doesn't mean that I'm trying to break away from Chris at all. That's home for me. I'm really comfortable with Chris in the video with me to be my crutch. So I'm really nervous about this, but what I told you guys in my little intro video is I'm going to start reading the books and let you guys go on this journey with me. So as you see, I've got my channel open here. It says A Man's Journey Begins. And that's what this is. It's my journey, and I'm inviting you along for the ride as I go through this book. So I bought the first book, showed you in my last video. This is a Game of Thrones. And what I'd like, to focus on this video is the first 3 chapters, basically. The prologue, then there's the Bran chapter and the Catelyn chapter. What I'd like to show you about this book is, before I started reading, I think I had read the prologue at this time. Chris and I went to Con of Thrones and met some other YouTubers you may know, and they were hanging out at the house one night, and I had them sign my book to give me, as I told them, a little extra juju, mojo, good luck, what have you. I had, let's see, that night I got Chris from Smokescreen to sign it. I had Val from Because Geek signed it. Tarzan from Trial by Trivia signed it. Let's see, I got Aziz, Ashaya, and Sean from the History of Westeros, who, by the way, I think might have the coolest intro to their videos on YouTube. And Zach from Game of Owns, and he was the organizer of the whole con. I didn't know it at the time, but he organized Con of Thrones. Did a really good job. He's a really cool guy. So, without further ado, you're gonna have to see me like this, guys. This is how I look when I dive into the books. All right, so let's talk about what I do. Is I keep a little a box of index cards, and when I start a chapter, I keep it out and I'll write notes. Got my trusty little pencil that you probably always see me with, my pencil sharpener handy, and I just write notes about each chapter. So I'm going to start with the prologue. Now, it starts just like the show, guys. I mean, it's really cool how it when you're reading this, I thought I was going to be able to read this book and, you know, as a standalone, trying to forget the show, but it's impossible. If you've already watched the show and you start reading this book, your mind takes you right to the characters in the show and what they look like and everything. But the prologue starts just like the show starts, with three guys from the Night's Watch. They're out on, trekking north of the Wall, chasing a gang of wildling raiders, and they've been out there for like 9 days. The three guys, we have Will, Garrett, and Sir Waymar Royce. And Will, he's been on the Wall for 4 years, and he's a veteran of like 100 rangings. Supposedly he's, one of the best trackers anybody's ever seen. And then you have Garrett. He's 50 plus years old. He's 40 years with the Night's Watch. Think about that. That's pretty crazy. And then you have Sir Waymar Royce. He's the commander of this little three-man team party, and he's only 18 years old. And he's been a member of the Night's Watch less than 6 months, the book says. What you have is they send Will ahead. He goes and scouts, and then he comes back and reports to them, the things he's found. Well, of course, he finds this group of wildlings, and just like you saw in the show, they're all dead, and there's smoke still coming out of the fire like it literally just happened, and the bodies are just torn into pieces and laying around, and it really scares him. So he goes back and tells them what he saw, and like, hey, we need to head back to the Wall. Well, this cocky little 18-year-old Royce, he's like, no, you're gonna take me to show me. So he makes Will, and Will and Garrett are like saying, come on, let's go back. The wildlings are no more trouble for us, let's head back. And he's like, no, they could have been sleeping, whatever. Take me, I want to see their bodies. And just like you saw in the show, they get there and the bodies are gone. Everything looks the same. Even the weapons that he had noticed when he got there the first time, the axe and whatnot, they're all still laying in the same place. It's just the bodies are gone. Well, he, Sir Waymar Royce, he's like, laughing at Will kinda. And he's talking loud, and Will's like, be quiet, and he's like, what are you afraid of, So he tells Will, he says, climb up the tree. I want you to look for smoke from a fire, because he thinks they've just moved camp. I mean, logically, they wouldn't move camp and leave their damn weapons and stuff behind. But he's determined to find these wildlings. So Will starts up the tree. He gets up the tree, like puts his knife in between his teeth so he can climb up the tree, and he notices something. Well, it starts getting really cold, and he notices some shapes moving through the forest. And I'll tell you, the way he describes it, as far as shiny, hardly can see. I mean, I'm picturing the way it looked on the movie The Predator, when you can barely catch a glimpse of a shape with that high technology camouflage that the Predators use. That's mirror-like. That's the way I pictured it. So anyway, basically what happens is Will wants to shout out and warn Waymar Royce, but he's afraid. He grips the tree real tight, and it says like the words were frozen in his mouth. So they come up on Waymar Royce. He draws his sword, says something like, shall we dance, or whatever, and they do clash swords a little bit. Will describes the sword that the other, as the book calls it, has as being something, forged out of ice almost, and it's like razor sharp, he could tell. Well, they clash swords a few times, and then Sir Waymar Royce's sword just splinters, and it sounds like after he goes down, they all stand around him in a circle and just hack him up pretty good. Well, Will, he stays clinging to the tree, very quiet. After a while, he doesn't hear anything, doesn't see anything. He goes down. He walks over. He sees Sir Waymar Royce laying on the ground, and he goes to pick up his sword that's all splintered. I said it looked like a tree that had been struck by lightning. I mean, if you picture that, that's crazy. So he picks up the sword, and when he looks up, there's Sir Waymar Royce standing above him, and his eyes are blue. And it basically says that the chapter ends with Sir Waymar Royce's hands going around Will's neck. Now, as I knew from watching the show, basically Sir Waymar Royce is now a white. And that is, in the show, it's kind of weird because it shows Will take off running, and he sees, actually, they behead Garrett. One of the others does. There's like a little white girl chasing them. And then Will is the one who runs down and gets caught, south of the wall and taken to Ned Stark. And Ned Stark, beheads him as a deserter from the Night's Watch. In the book, basically, it says Sir Waymar Royce kills Will. And what you have, the next chapter, the Bran chapter, basically starts with the group getting together to ride out to watch this beheading. Bran, Robb, you've got Ned and Theon and Jory. They all go out to do this beheading. And it's actually they're beheading Garrett. The reason you know that is because in the prologue it describes Garrett as both of his ears missing from like frostbite, and the guy who gets beheaded in the beginning of the Bran chapter has no ears. So that's one thing that they did change up on the TV show. Well, other than that, though, it's pretty much the same. You have Jon Snow. He's telling... First off, let me tell you this. I did write down their ages. In the book, you've got Bran, who is 7 years old. Ned, or Eddard Stark, is 35 years old. Theon, at the time, was 19 years old. And Jon Snow is 14 years old. Now, it says Robb is the same age as Jon, basically. It doesn't actually put a number on Robb, so I'm assuming they're both 14. Jon tells Bran, keep your eyes open. Father will know if you look away. And so they watch the beheading. They're heading back, and Jon and Robb start racing their horses off, and a little bit later, they hear a commotion. The Ned and Bran and the ones left behind hear a commotion, and they go up to see what Robb and Jon found. And as you know from watching the show, they have found a dead dire wolf. They go down there and look, and the dire wolf has an antler broke off in its throat, basically, and that's what killed it. And then when you start thinking about antlers and dire wolves, dire wolf is the sigil, for the House Stark. And then the antlers, you think of Robert Baratheon, the House Baratheon with their stag. So I thought that was pretty crazy, reading that. Even though I already thought that from watching the show when I read it again. So anyway, this dead dire wolf has some living dire wolf pups there. And again, just like in the show, Jon is the one down there handing them out, and Theon wants to kill one. They stop him. Ned actually agrees about putting them out of their misery, make them die quick. It would be the thing to do. The people are saying, we haven't seen dire wolves south of the wall in hundreds of years, this and that. And Jon convinces him. He's like, no, Father, this has kind of meant to be. There are, the dire wolf is your house sigil, and there's enough pups here for each of your children. And he wasn't counting himself in that number, because he says in there, I'm not a trueborn Stark. You know, his last name is Snow. It's not Stark. He is Ned's bastard son. But he's really cool. I mean, to do that, to say that at 14 years old and leave himself out, knowing he'd like to have one, I thought that was a pretty stand-up thing to do. And it kind of sets up Jon's character right off the bat to me, as far as how we have seen Jon evolve. He took a lot of Ned's traits, the good qualities Ned has, being so honorable and straight shooter, you know. Well, turns out after everybody walks away, after Ned agrees, begrudgingly agrees, he's like, you know, you're going to feed them. You're not going to bother anybody with these things. Robb and Bran agree to take care of them themselves. And so as everybody's leaving, Jon finds one more. And it just happens to be a damn albino pup with these red, pink eyes. As we know later on, that's kind of cool with what we know now with, you know, R plus L equals J. And he has the Targaryen in it. I don't know. It's really cool to think about. But one thing I will tell you that I found in this chapter that I highlighted that I think is pretty cool, and I'll read it to you real quick. It says, now they're talking about the dead direwolf. It says, his father tossed the antler to the side and cleansed his hands in the snow. I'm surprised she lived long enough to whelp, he said. His voice broke the spell. Maybe she didn't, Jory said. I've heard tales. Maybe the bitch was already dead when the pups came. Born with the dead, another man put in. Worse luck. No matter, said Hullen. They be dead soon enough, too. Bran gave a wordless cry of dismay. But that caught me when they were talking about the direwolf being, maybe she was dead when the pups were born. And that made me think about, you know, the major players in our show whose mother died when they were born. When I'm talking about, you know, Jon, and you have Dany and Tyrion. I'm sure there's, as I read, I may find others, but I thought about those guys whose mother died when they were born. And right off the bat in this book, it starts talking about the direwolf, born with the dead. And that really stood out to me, so I highlighted that. I wanted to share that with you. Could be, you know, it could just be setting a little foreshadowing, and maybe it means nothing. But to me, I thought that was a cool saying, born with the dead. And so pretty much the Bran chapter, that's all it's about, is the beheading and on the way back to Winterfell, finding the dead direwolf and the pups. Then you get, these chapters are really quick and short. So after getting started, I found that I want to encourage people to not be intimidated by this book series, because you get a good stopping point really quickly. You know, these chapters read really smooth and they go by really quick. So the third chapter is Catelyn, and this chapter, it sets up Catelyn Stark, who's Ned's wife. She was a Tully before they got married. And, you know, we'll learn more about her. So, like, I'm not going to go into all the history that I actually know now by watching the show and everything. I'm gonna give you these details about these characters as they come in the book. So, it basically says that Catelyn, you know, was a Tully, and she's Ned's wife. She's from Riverrun, specifically the Red Fork of the Trident. It says she worships the seven-faced god, and Ned worships the old gods. So this chapter starts out with her going to the Godswood to find Ned, because she knows every time Ned takes a man's life, he goes to the Godswood, and he's by the heart tree, and there's a little pool there, a little pond, that he sits down and I guess prays, meditates, asks for forgiveness maybe to his old gods. But it describes the weirwood trees in this chapter. I guess want to introduce them to us, so from this point on, as we read and we hear a weirwood tree, we can picture it in our mind. It says weirwood trees have white bark and dark red leaves. It says the children of the forest had carved faces in them before the coming of the first men. So that's our first mention of the children of the forest in this book. So it lets you know that the children were around a long time before the first men showed up. It says in the south, all of them had been cut down or burned except for the Isle of Faces, where green men kept their silent watch. It says in the north, every castle had its godwood, heart tree with a face carved in it. So I thought that was pretty cool. That basically, if you think that the children of the forest went around and carved these faces in these trees before the men came, and then the men came and they built castles next to this tree with a face on it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then in this chapter, it introduces the Stark House words, winter is coming. That is first mentioned there. And then it basically is Catelyn going to talk to Ned and share some bad news with him. She shares the news that Jon Arryn has died. Well, of course, I know from watching the show who he is and who he was, but the book says that, let's see, Jon Arryn was the hand of the king, Robert Baratheon, and he had fostered Ned and Robert Baratheon, the king in this whole story, when they were young at the Eyrie. Well, it says that Jon and Ned both married Tully sisters. You know, of course, Ned married Catelyn, and Jon Arryn married Lysa. And it says they got married the same day to these sisters 15 years ago. All right. It also says, it mentions Maester Pycelle. He's at King's Landing. And Catelyn assures Ned that Maester Pycelle had given Jon Arryn the milk of the poppy to ease his pain while he was dying, basically. Because evidently, whatever happened to Jon Arryn, we haven't gotten there yet, but whatever happened to him came on suddenly. And evidently he was suffering pretty bad. Okay. This chapter mentions for the first time Mad King Aerys II Targaryen. Talks about how he had demanded Ned and Robert's heads in the past, and Jon Arryn took their side in, you know, what we know ends up being Robert's rebellion. And let's see. Oh, also it mentions Catelyn's uncle. And Ned basically, you know, is saying, well, how's your sister? You know, when he hears about Jon Arryn's death, how's your sister? And Catelyn says she's gone back to the Eyrie. So she had left King's Landing and went back to the Eyrie. And Ned says, well, I guess your uncle's there. You know, she'll be all right. All right, so basically Ned says, you know, that's cool. Your uncle Brendan is there. And, you know, as we know, that's Blackfish. That's the first mention of him there. And so let's see. She says, you know, this note that I got that said Jon Arryn died says also that the king and his whole family and everybody are coming up here to Winterfell to visit us. That's when, you know, we are introduced to the names of Ned's brother, Ben. He's not called Benjen yet. He just basically says, send a raven to the wall because Ben would love to come down to see Robert. That's what he says. So there's Benjen mentioned. And he mentions Cersei Lannister, which we know is Robert's wife. She's the queen. And it mentions that the Lannisters are from Casterly Rock. And it mentions Tommen, the youngest prince, and Tommen was 7 years old, and it mentions that he's the same age as Bran. So it doesn't mention Joffrey or anything, but we'll get to him later. But all I want to do with you guys is, as this information is coming through these chapters, I'll share it with you because, you know, pretty much I'm starting way back at the beginning. So I'm just trying to for maybe people who haven't read the book, let them see, you know, how quickly some information comes in and how some things you already know aren't mentioned quite yet. But we will get to it because these chapters are so detailed. And as I've said to several people, after reading this, I totally can understand how easy it was for HBO to put such a great show out. I mean, the details in these books are ridiculous, and it's really fun to go back and read this and hope that you uncover something, you know, that something sticks out that might tie into what's happening in season 7 and what's happening, you know, at the end of all this, how to try to figure it out. So those are the 3 chapters I'm going to cover in this video. I don't want these to be too awful long. You know, this may end up not being my normal set for these videos. I'm working on something with a friend of mine, possibly set up a unique set. I don't know. I'll try to keep these coming regular. You know, the set may change, you know, week to week. Who knows? We'll see. But so what I plan on doing is, if you want to read along with me, I'm going to read the next 3 chapters, which are Daenerys. So I can't wait to let you know what happens there. Eddard. So Ned gets his first chapter. And Jon. So Daenerys, Eddard, and Jon are the next 3 I'm going to cover in George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones. Sorry you had to put up with that glare on my glasses, but you know, once you hit 40, guys, you'll see you need a little help sometimes. I'm super excited to finally be able to do this first video. I've been getting lots of emails from you guys wishing me luck, giving me different ideas. You know, this may end up almost feeling like a book of the month club, the way I'm going a couple chapters at a time. You know, this, once it gets out there, this video will be out there forever. So who knows, a year from now, maybe somebody says, hey, I'm going to read the books. I wonder if there's a channel that reads along the books that I could follow, because everybody reads at different, you know, speeds and rates. So I know it's going to seem like it's slow for you guys, but once all these are lined up and they're out there, if somebody reads quickly, they can plow through 3 or 4 of these videos at a time if they like. And I hope you enjoy these, you know, the way I'm trying to do this. I do welcome any, you know, critiques. If you want to give me some new ideas on another way to possibly do it. I hope as I went through there that these chapters make sense to you. But I do encourage anyone to try to read these if you haven't. If you're a show only watcher and you happen to come over here because you recognize me from Chris's channel Smokescreen and you just want to check it out, I hope that maybe I have inspired you and encouraged you to pick the books up. Do not be intimidated by them. They read very smoothly and easily. So guys, until next time, man, you know, look for me on Smokescreen and my other channel, Dust Daily Useless Sports Trivia, where I do still put a video out every 5 years. So I encourage you to go check out the ones, the 15 years worth of videos I have over there. But I'm going to try to speed this one up. I'm going to try to get these put out, at least get a video out a week. That's my goal. But thanks again. I'll give out my email in the description of this video. So I welcome, you know, new people to shoot me an email and give me some advice. Until next time, guys,